My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's IEEE USA Livestream webinar, Personal Branding, Increasing Your Career Opportunities. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that is valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinions and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. Joining us today is Dr. Bob Danielle, who returns to us to do another presentation on career building. Bob is an expert in the areas of career transitioning, leadership development, and change management, and has held strategic roles in the media, technology, government, and higher education sectors. He's also authored 2 IEEE USA ebooks and is a certified performance coach and performance and career coach. Without further ado, I'll now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for all of you that have taken the time to join me today. I promise your time is valuable, and I promise to make sure that I validate your commitment this morning. So just a couple of things about myself. I live up here in the Northwest, and today I decided to put the picture of me in Hawaii because if you know anything about the Northwest, it's usually rainy, but today it's extremely cold. So this just reminds me of what could be if I decide to get out of here for a few days. I've gone through multiple career transitions, and branding has helped me. In fact, I've actually had 2 transitions in my 60s, and the branding piece of it has really kind of helped me make that happen. I'm a lifelong learner, which I will encourage all of you to do if you're thinking about creating your brand and also to extend your career. And to be honest, it lends itself to your quality of life. I'm also a career consultant. I value that. I've gone through multiple careers myself. In fact, my dissertation for my doctorate was actually on career transitioning. And ultimately, and finally, is that I believe that simple is better. So I promise you, I will not throw out, multi-syllable words. I will try to keep things to the very basic. I believe that sometimes we overcomplicate things, especially when it involves ourselves. So let's get it going. So today's agenda seems a little action-packed, and I promise you I will get you out on time and leave more than enough time for questions. And so, just do it. We'll just be that. We'll talk a little bit about branding, not enough to bore you, but enough to kind of set the tone. We'll talk a little bit about where this all starts at, what I call a foundational piece, which is all begins with you. Then I'll go through some steps to building your personal brand. And they are in sequential order, but you can, some of these you could switch around if you needed to be. Finally, we'll follow up with the benefits of a strong personal brand. We'll do a quick wrap up, and then I'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. Just quickly, I'll just do a little housekeeping. Number one, Jonathan is going to monitor the chat for me, and if he sees any, a groundswell of questions and comments, and he might just interrupt me and ask me some questions, which I'm happy to do. And finally, I just want to share that, there's a lot of folks that will proclaim to be experts, and there's a lot of information on branding out there. And so I will just tell you this. If you think of branding as like a stew, or your personal branding as a stew, just think of me as maybe one recipe or one ingredient or 2 or 3 or 4 that you can add to that. I think it's really important to not necessarily follow scripts per se, and these types of things that are very personal to you, but more importantly, take in, what will help you, whether it validates what you're doing or it's new to what you're doing. And so at the end of the day, you'll walk away with something that will not only help you in your professional life, it will also help you in your personal life. The one thing I will add, and I'm sorry about this, is that the slides are going to have a little more words than I normally would have. I've had some audio issues, and I know that we deal with virtual. It can be glitches in the audio, so at least you'll be able to write notes or take notes from what is on the slides. I promise I won't read from them, but it at least give you some kind of, guidelines, guideposts to follow as I proceed in the presentation. So as you can imagine, big brands, they're out there, right? We all have seen their logos, we all have seen their ads, and we all know that they are abundant, right? 500,000 brands, 5,000 brand messages a day. And what are they really designed to do? Well, they're designed to increase the visibility, the reach, the awareness, and overall the revenue and value of an organization. Personal brands are very, very similar. The only difference is about you. So the things that they make you do is they stand you out. You stand out differently. It differentiates you from the crowd. A strong personal brand, I should add, opens doors for new opportunities. Again, I have found that when you have a strong personal brand, not only do opportunities seem to present themselves, they seem to present themselves when you're not even trying to find them. The credibility and the confidence that you have overall goes up. I just feel like you take a lot more control of just not your career trajectory. Sorry about that. But also really your career path and also your personal direction. And as I mentioned before with the big brands, a strong personal brand will actually add perceived value. And actually, I would say more value. And it depends on, how you present it and how you shape that and put it together. So, without question, the ownership piece is the foundational piece of any branding opportunity, any branding exercise, any career pathing, any really thing you do in your life. You really need to own it. And so one of the things that we've learned over time, that ownership takes on whole different perceptions depending on who you ask and what, where they might be coming from. And it really evolves whether or not you feel like you have internal control, which is the things you can control, or the external things that you cannot control. That is sometimes where you run into this little congruence issues where you're trying to focus on the things you can control. And really what ownership in my mind is controlling the things you can control. And then there's the concept of action versus inaction. And really ownership is about practicing the power of choice. What is available to you and how do you take advantage of that? But ultimately, the question is, what is ownership and what does that mean to you, especially when it's in your career? So I will tell you that recent surveys have said that when asked of employers and employees who owns their career, the employers say it's the employees and the employees say it's the employers. And this is the funny thing about this, is that the numbers aren't 100%, meaning that like 68% of the employers say that the employee owns it, and like 73% says that the employees say the employers own it. And so what really boils down to is that, do we really understand the concept of ownership? And so one thing that I like to do is give this analogy, and if you've heard me talk before, this may be redundant, and I promise I'll try to mix it up a little bit, but it's a concept of renting versus owning, okay? And the way that I like to do this is, think about the time that you or somebody that you know has rented an automobile or a vehicle. And so when you think about that, I have some questions I like to ask. So, do you wash a rental car? Do you clean it? Do you clean the interior? Do you change the oil in a rental car? Do you change the starter, the tire? You may change a tire or two. And finally, do you personalize your rental car? Right? Do you add like the sun creatures in there or the things that hang from your rearview mirror? And if you've answered at least no to two of those questions, then you understand the concept between renting and owning. When you rent something, it's not really yours. Yeah, you may use it for a little while, and sure, you may get some value out of it. But at the end of the day, when you rent something, it's like being a passenger in a car that someone else is driving, okay? And they're taking you where they want to take you. And so there's a little bit of a transactional relationship that goes on there. But when you own something, it's yours, right? You have a certain different perspective. It feels different. You feel different because honestly, it's yours. And so when you think about your personal brand, I want you to think about that concept. Are you renting it or owning it? And if you take one thing away from today's presentation, it's understanding the value of owning. And owning could start in little stages, believe me when I say that. But at the end of the day, this is all about you. And so if you can just find a way to grasp onto the things that you can control and manage to work your way through that, I think you'll be far ahead of where you were if you hadn't been doing that before. Okay, so here's the steps to your to building your personal brand. I will not read them. We will go through each and every one of these. Again, these are in somewhat sequential order, though some people do flip-flop your goals and who are you. Just for this particular exercise, I'm going to stick to the sequence that we're in. Obviously, I built the slide, so I can't change it, but we'll just take it from there. Okay, so who are you? So the one thing that when you start to build your personal brand is you got to really start to understand who you are. And so you really need to take the time to think about the things that make you, you, right? Behaviors, thoughts, values, needs, and also think about how do they shape you? What do they make you do when you think about those types of things? It's not enough to just list them. It's also to think about how do they impact you in different various parts of your life, professionally and personally. The second piece is to think about your strengths and attributes, okay? You know, these are the things that make you you, the things that you bring to the table, the value that you add. I like to say that these are the things that people know about you and count on of you. And here's something that's a little bit different than other presentations that I've seen. Compensation is optional. And by that I mean is that sometimes when we think about strengths and attributes, we think about the things we are paid for. And, you know, when you think about that, it seems like we sometimes have a tendency to miss other things that we're not being paid for. So, you know, this can happen if you're somebody that's been out of the workforce for quite a while, or perhaps somebody that's been in the backside of your career and you're doing volunteer work, or you're doing, you know, stretch assignments. Sometimes these are things that you're not being compensated for, but yet they are things that are strengths. So if you're volunteering at a nonprofit and you're organizing events and you're doing a lot of other stuff that, quite frankly, that you're doing for free, that's above and beyond that you've done before, even in the workplace, those are your strengths and your attributes, and you need to take account for those. The VPs are just that, right? Your vision, your purpose, your values, and your passions. These are the things that, again, that really formulate who you are and really what you might want to be. And then finally, how do others see you? That's a big part of the component of who you are. I like to say, and I'll bring this up a little later on, that I've been fortunate enough to surround myself with people who are invested in my success, but will also tell me things that I might not want to hear. Like, for example, my breath stinks, or I have something stuck in my teeth. But that's what you want. You want folks that are just not going to, you know, shoot down every idea you have and come at you with a very critical approach. You want to be around those that actually are invested in your future, that want to see you succeed, but are not afraid to tell you things that maybe you really don't want to hear. Okay, so what are your goals? When you're starting to put together your personal brand, you have to figure out, what do you ultimately want to achieve? What that may be. Is it a promotion, a career change? Do you want a new job? Do you want to change sectors? Are you thinking about retirement? I mean, are you thinking about running for office? Those are the things you have to set out and be realistic about it. It's okay to shoot, you know, we talk about stretch goals, but it's okay to be, to align a little bit with reality and a little bit of what a future state might look like. That's okay. But at the end of the day, you need to have some kind of guidelines, a sort of what I would call a North Star, a compass, a lighthouse that you're kind of looking for to reach with this personal brand. And it's funny, I did not know that the superpower was going to be mentioned in the opening slide, video. But you know, what are your superpowers? What are the things that you and others feel are special? What do they look like? And how are you going to use them in the future? A lot of us have a lot of great skill sets, but ultimately we decide not to use them. We put them to the sideline. And when you're building your personal brand, you've got to make sure that that brand is not only unique, but also adds value to you, not just as a person, but also as a professional. The other question you have to ask yourself is, what more do you want? And in your life, in your career, in your future, either currently or you know, going ahead. And the final piece of this is that, how does this connect? How does all these pieces connect to who I am now and where I would like to be? And if you could do all of those things and formulate what your goals are, it gives you a nice little launching point to start to build out the other pieces of the steps that we're going to talk about going forward, which is you're identifying it as your target audience. So your target audience could be organizations. It could be any number of these things that are listed on the screen that are showing up here, whether that is markets, locations, regions, areas, sectors, industries. Think about who you're trying to let know more about yourself. If you go back to think about those big brands, they sit down and they actually outline their target markets. They know exactly where they want to get their, their branding out there so that they can be appealing to those folks that find their brand attractive. You do the same thing when you build your personal brand. You also look at your contacts, individuals, friends, family, associations, groups. One of the things I thought was very interesting, and the reason why I tell folks to look at the individuals or contacts and families, is that you will be surprised if you ask somebody that you feel like knows you really well who you are and what you do. They'll have a tendency to just talk about your job title, and sometimes they might not even know that. They may just talk a little bit about some of the things you may have talked about with them at. And when you're thinking about your personal brand, you've got to think about that target audience. How do you get that message out there to them, that where they can look at that and go, wow, there's some value there, and I see this person, or I see where this person is going, or what they may bring to myself and also my organizations. And really the key piece in identifying your target audience is look for those needs, those challenges, issues, problems, things that you can solve. This really works well, especially if you're looking at your own sector, your own industry. Maybe you're not in the right, you feel like you're not in the right fit. Maybe you want to move into a different role inside your organization, inside your sector, and you're noticing that the market is changing, that the needs have changed, and the market and the industry really haven't kept up with it. But you have that idea, you have those solutions, and you have something that may be of value that maybe no one's aware of right now. That's one way that you can look at this as far as identifying your target audience and eventually crafting your personal brand. So one of the bigger pieces and some of the hardest pieces for people is, how do you tell your story? We all know that our own narratives are a little bit tough to tell. Some folks are very humble and they really don't want to get into that. Some people just will tell you that what their title is. But there was a great quote that I have, and I'll just read it out loud, is be yourself because everyone else is taken. The key about your personal brand is that it is unique, right? And it's what makes you authentic. And authentic brands are what makes others attracted to you. When your brand is not authentic, is not genuine, and it's a little cliche, it just gets lost in the kind of the woodwork, so to speak. So don't be afraid to tell your story, and don't be afraid to share what's more, what is it about you that makes you special? I think we're all special in our own ways, and a lot of times we don't get that opportunity to do that. This is where you need to tell your story. More importantly is that once you have your target audiences, what's important to them? In the example before, I mentioned if there's solutions that to solve problems that have been ongoing or now currently taking place, this is the opportunity to tell that story on how you can be that solutions provider. The other piece of the telling your story is, how does it align with everything you've done in your life, professionally and personally? Accomplishments are really good ways to tell your story. Again, we have a tendency to talk about our responsibilities. We have a tendency to talk about our outputs. This is an opportunity to talk about your outcomes, okay? And if you want to go to a deeper dive, this is where you can do a root cause analysis and then figure out why you were successful in your accomplishments. Sometimes it's a little bit of luck, and you probably don't want to put that in your personal brand, but sometimes you'll realize that, oh my gosh, there's things that I did here that I'm not taking for account. I'm not accounting for in anything and everything that I'm doing right now. And then really take the time to reflect on the things that you really do well. Again, this is where you might bring in outside people to ask them their opinion, but think about your unique value, okay? All of us bring unique talents, values, skills, and unfortunately, sometimes we don't bring those to the forefront. But when you're building your brand, in your brand statement, this is the time to kind of lay those out and make sure that that story is being told to put you in the best possible light. Okay, so creating your brand statement. This is like when this is when you get asked that question, tell me about yourself. For anyone that's ever been through interviews, you know this question is coming up, and we have a tendency to just kind of rattle off either our job titles or maybe we talk a little bit about our lives. This is where you make that concise brand statement that really separates you from everyone else. This is not where you kind of mumble through it or kind of ramble on. This is the opportunity. This is where your personal brand statement will really make a difference. And we'll go into, I have some examples that I'll share with you later on. Okay. And this is what I was really referencing. It is a statement. It is not your title. Okay. And it's something that will be memorable and also has to be actionable. Okay. And also it needs to be about you. If you don't really believe it, or you have a tough time thinking, oh my gosh, this is not really me, believe me, that'll be transparent to anybody that you talk with. Okay. Find something that really represents who you are. Okay. I'm not talking about exaggeration. I'm talking about getting to the nectar, the kind of the golden nugget of what you bring and what you are. And I think that's what will really separate and make your brand statement pop. This really just alludes to everything I've said before. Authentic, genuine. Gravitational means, are people drawn to you because of this? And the concise piece I keep mentioning over and over again, there is a tendency to kind of ramble when you talk about yourself. Your statement should be concise to the point where it gets everything out, but not so brief that it doesn't seem like you've really spent a lot of time working through it. And then here's a template that I like to share. And again, I could share these slides. I can send them out with Jonathan and get them out to everybody's attended. So just a quick template. Obviously, there's different templates that you can use. So, I want to be known for being X so that I can deliver, X to Y. Now I'm going to share some branding statements for you. And as you read them, I won't read them out loud. As you read them, tell me tell me which ones you like in the chat, and there'll be 3 of them. So I'm going to go through the first one. I'll wait a little bit here. Okay. The second one. And I'll just put the third one up there. And as you go through and read these statements, which one of these resonates with you the most? And Jonathan, I can't see the chat. So if, and they would be 1, 2, and 3, obviously, on the screen. So I'm just curious if people are putting stuff in there.
Hi, Bob. No comments yet, but folks, if you would like to send in a response, just type them in through the chat function, and then we'll relay it to Bob so that he can, so that he knows what's going on. Oh, and actually, Bob, we do have some responses. So
okay,
a couple of people are saying that they resonate with the third one.
Okay.
No.
Which is just Jonathan? Any other thoughts in there?
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of different responses actually.
Okay.
It seems like a lot of them are saying the third one, but we do have quite a few who resonate with the first and second one. So definitely a lot of diverse responses.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, I will just share that the third one is actually mine, and it actually, and Jonathan didn't say in the intro, but that was my brand statement that I actually used to during my interviews with Amazon, which I now currently work for. So that's my third one. The first one was actually another someone else that I know that actually they have used. And the middle one is one that to be honest with you, I've actually used when I was in higher education in another role. So what you'll find about your personal brand statements is that you can, if you've been in the workforce for quite a while, which I have been, I've been in the workforce now for like 40 years. You can shape your brand statement over time. And so the last one is actually the one that I recently used, and I had found that it had been very successful for me. So thank you for sharing your feedback. We'll move on. So how do you promote your brand? Now, this is a little bit different. And it's kind of funny too, because when you've been around as long as I have, you learn that people think they can do two things. One of them is teach, and one of them is market. But when it comes to ourselves, we have a tendency to kind of avoid marketing. We find some folks are very good at that, or they go up a little bored with that. But really, realistically, if you really spend the time to build your brand, you really need to find ways to promote it and not feel bad about it. And there's ways to do it that it's not over the top. So again, I tell people just to socialize it with your strategic contacts. And let me define strategic contacts. These are not, your 500 Facebook fans, or your, the 500 plus people that you have on LinkedIn, though you can socialize it with them. These are folks that, they're invested in your personal success, that really, again, they tell you that they believe in you, right? And you can tell them anything, and they will tell you anything, especially things you don't want to hear. So socialization is a big part of promoting your brand. And again, it's okay to do that. It's conferences are another ways to do that. Webinars, just like this one, workshops, joining professional associations, organizations. I will tell you that when I started, really examining my personal brand, I got opportunities to do webinars, and those opportunities opened up other opportunities. And so just putting yourself out there, things like, your e-portfolios, writing, publications, creating articles on LinkedIn, and to kind of dovetail into LinkedIn. Now, I will tell you my own personal opinion about LinkedIn, and it is just my personal opinion. I do like LinkedIn, but I'm going to be candid. I've seen a lot of folks' profiles on LinkedIn, and quite frankly, there is some exaggeration out there. I'm not saying it's a bad tool, and to be honest, I think that's some of the folks that have reached out to get me to join their organizations have found me on LinkedIn. And so I would just say this: you can use this to promote your brand, but just be genuine, just be real. Stay true to yourself, because ultimately, if you do get called into an interview, you're going to have to answer that question. Tell me about yourself. And if it seems like you're hesitating or you're reading a script, it's not going to come off as genuine, and it's not going to come off as natural as you like. But I do like LinkedIn. But as I said before, it does have its little quirks, but it is a social media tool that you can use if that's the path that you like to take. And then I also mentioned this earlier on, is that you really need to invest in your own, professional development. And by that, I mean, there's LinkedIn Learning. There's, if your employer offers educational benefits, take those. Anything that you could do to improve or to add to your post-secondary credentials is really great. It not only demonstrates to whomever you're trying to, talk to, or, to impress, that you are, you're an active learner. But more importantly, it gives you a sense of purpose, and it makes you really feel good about learning. I don't know about you. I continue to learn. I have more degrees than a thermometer, but I continue to want to learn and learn new things, because it just makes me feel good. It makes me feel alive. And then the one other thing I would say, and I've referenced this a little bit earlier, is you can volunteer. You don't just have to rely on your employer to grow your brand, or actually to build it. You can do it through volunteering, sharing expertise to other areas outside of work. You could be a coach of a kid's soccer team. You could volunteer at a food bank. I mean, anything and everything to promote your brand, as long as it's within the context of being genuine and authentic and valued. Now, these are the 3 C's of branding. Normally, I wouldn't go through this, but I think it's important, because it really talks about kind of the concept of branding, but more importantly, how it applies to personal branding. So the first one is clarity, and we've said this before over and over again. Be concise and clear about who you are, what sets you apart. And when you think about those brands, right, that are really strong, they're very clear about what they are and what they do. I think about Nordstrom's and how, they're really known for customer service, and, the stories about them accepting returns years and years later, right? So there's very much clarity in what their brand means. And so that's what you're striving for. The second piece is consistency. You really have to be consistent about your brand and your brand promise in everything that you do. It doesn't matter what it is. being consistent is the key. There was a story about Bruce Lee, and he was talking. Someone asked him, "Are you afraid of somebody that practices 10,000 kicks?" And he said, "I'm not afraid of somebody who practices 10,000 kicks. I'm afraid of somebody that practices the same kick 10,000 times." And the point there is that you have to consistently, I said, go out and make sure that your brand is out there. It's consistent. If there's a disconnect between what you're saying in your brand and what is written on your resume or what is on your LinkedIn page or what is on others, e-portfolio or whatever that may be, that's going to create a credibility issue. So you want to be consistent. And then the final piece to this is you want to be constant, right? You've got to be as visible as possible. Frequency and reach are really the kind of the keys to advertising. It's the same thing with, getting your personal brand out there. It's got to be constant. I'm not talking about in someone's face, 24/7, but your brand's got to be out there as much as possible. Whether you put that in your headline, whether of your LinkedIn profile, or whether or not when you get the opportunity to introduce yourself. And sometimes when we're in meetings or we're in events or even in social setting, you can actually use your personal brand as that. I have done that. Again, I just don't tell people what I do. I just tell people who I am. And we know this because strong brands are constant, right? There's a reason why the golden arches are out there and you drive by them. They don't put them away at night. And because we know that when you're not constant, you're not top of mind, you're out of sight and you're out of mind. The final piece, I believe, to all this is that you've got to inspect what you inspect, right? So this is one thing that a lot of us don't do. And this is one thing I will tell you that you can do this in advance. It might be worth it if you haven't done it in a while. It's just Google yourself and see what's out there. I cannot tell you how many folks that I have worked with who've gone out there and found some things about themselves that they wish that wasn't out there, and two, that is a surprise to them. More importantly, you got to figure out whether or not you're absent. If there's nothing out there you on social media, you need to probably change that. If there's something negative, it's going to be a little tough. I'm going to be candid with you. It can be a little bit tough to change that. I do some work in reputation management, and there's ways to mitigate this, but it's good to know it up front. That way you can address it. Nothing's worse than being surprised if someone has seen something about you that doesn't, paint you in a positive light. Neutral means there's just a name out there. And then positive is what you want to strive for. You want to have something positive out there. So if you Google yourself or whether it may be for, and you might have to Google different searches. Like, so if you're like me, I'm Robert Danielle is my formal name. I'll do Bob Danielle. I'll do Bob Danielle at places I've worked just to see what's out there. Sometimes I'm really surprised. There's been articles out on some of the stuff I do, and it is positive, but it does take a while to find that. So that would be the first piece of that. The other thing is to commit to some type of, check-ins or pop-ins with your strategic context, just to stay in touch. This is also a great way to kind of stay, to socialize your brand. And also part of branding is not just what you can do for other people, but or what they can do for you. It's reciprocal. So this is just a way to kind of keep your brand out there, as well as, grow and continue to kind of nurture your, strategic contacts. And some of the ways that you can tell your personal brand's working is that there's a sense of confidence. It's just that, you're not going to stumble when someone asks you to tell you about them, to tell you about yourself. You feel authentic, and quite frankly, you feel like you have a much better handle on where your career is at and where your career may be. Your opportunities will increase. I wish I would have worked on my personal brand a lot sooner. I made a commitment to my personal brand in January of 2020. And, it's been 2 years, and it's just been an amazing change. And I thought I had things pretty well handled. I am so surprised sometimes of the opportunities that either get pushed in my direction, whether I choose or look for them, they seem to be there. And then it's also people start to understand you a little bit differently, and more importantly, how you could help them in their organization, which I think is an added plus. And that in itself lends to other opportunities. When people have a good understanding about what you bring to the table, then when they're involved in conversations where folks or organizations are looking for something or someone like you become top of mind right away. And then in turn kind of creates this circle of opportunities that become more and more readily available to you. And again, when you audit or, take a look at what's going on, if you find yourself, off track, figure out what happened. A lot of times something has either changed. Maybe, the first time you went through your branding, building your statement, there was some things that maybe you missed on, maybe indeed you have grown skill sets and now you're not that brand is kind of, then now it needs to be reinvented. And if you have to evolve it, that's great. Because I think that's important to evolve it over time. You don't want to have a stagnant brand. And then really you may just establish a habit of reassessing it year in and year out. I go back and I look at the things that I've done, and I use 3-month intervals to take a look at, how's my brand? What does it look like? Is it still applicable? Is it still valuable? Do I still believe it? And I'll check with people to see if they still not just remember my statement, but the key elements of my brand. Okay, so the 10 benefits of a strong personal brand definitely set you apart. There is no doubt about it. We know that in business. We know that for anybody's personal brand. A strong personal brand will set you apart. It'll put you away or put you above others that may be going for the same opportunities. And speaking of opportunities, you're going to attract a lot more of them, even when you're not trying, as I said before. Also, it just improves your visibility and your reach and your presence. It just gives you a little more of a lift than you would possibly think when you don't have one or you don't have a strong personal brand. I like this last one because this middle section, because I really truly believe it provides a career safety net. When last year, my organization I previously worked for decided that they no longer wanted to have an operation in this region, and so I found myself unemployed. But I wasn't afraid. I knew that I had choices. I could have retired, or I could have pursued opportunities that aligned with the things that drove me, that made me feel alive, that made me feel like I could be a key contributor. And it was my brand. It was out there. I had several people reach out to me right away when I let them know that I was no longer going to be employed. And it really helped me in a lot of ways. And so I'm so grateful that I took the initiative to take this, kind of added step to building my brand. But again, that was me personally. Of course, the confidence piece of it is also there, as well as, you grow your professional network. And here's the couple of key other pieces too. I mean, as I said before, you take control of your career. You have much higher value. And more importantly, it turns your fans into promoters. And what I mean that is that all of us have those people in our lives that really believe in us, or they're advocates, they're champions in a lot of ways, right? But sometimes they don't necessarily know what we do, or they know that we're a good person, they know we're X, Y, and Z, but sometimes they don't connect those dots. And so when you do have a strong personal brand, those fans, those folks that are in your orbit, so to speak, they become an extension of you, and that becomes really beneficial down the line. And the one thing I do want to say is that I've been talking a lot about I, right, and you. I also want to incorporate the we, right? Part of this branding exercise is to think about those ways that you can reciprocate to those that have helped you along the way. And so I do a lot of things because I want to pay it forward, and so I want to leave you with that as well. So we're going to wrap this up. Number one, take ownership, right? You got to commit. You got to jump in with both feet and say that I'm going to own this, because when you do that, everything else seems to fall into place. You got to understand who you are. Sometimes that's the hardest thing for people to do. We have a tendency to define ourselves by the labels and the titles that we have. So really take the time to dig into that. As I mentioned before, ask others that have an invested interest in you to figure out what you need to know about yourself or what you should know about yourself. You'll be surprised. Sometimes they bring up things that you didn't even know that you do well. And it makes you smile and it actually helps you build that brand. Authenticity, being genuine and being consistent and constant is really the way to go. It's just so much easier to talk about yourself and you're in a branding approach when you really are that, you really believe that, and you're really consistent with it. Grow your strategic contacts, right? And nurture them too. So touch base with them. Again, be that person that people want to be around and people want in their organizations, in their life, and vice versa. Trust but verify, okay? It's great to have the brand. It's great to go through all this, but if you just let it just end with that and put it on a shelf and let it get dusty, that's not going to work. You need to go back and audit it. Make sure that it's doing everything that you want it to do. Make sure it still has the same meaning that it did when you put it together, and then evolve it if you have to. And that's actually the second steps, the final steps, right? Adapt, adjust, and evolve, right? It's not stagnant. This is something that you have to constantly take a look at, because over time you will evolve. And then I want you to think about this from a marathon, not a sprint perspective, because we have a tendency, and then wash, rinse, and repeat, which means you're going to have to go with this as an iterative process. But think marathon. Building a brand is not going to take overnight. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But taking those steps each and every day is going to get you closer and closer to it. Like I said, I started building my brand in a way that the way it is today, I started it in 2020. I still don't think it's a finished piece of work right now, but I'm working towards it. And I know it's not a sprint, because when you rush something, it has a tendency not to have the quality that you want as if you take the time to build it correctly. So with that said, I'm going to pause, and I thank you. Hopefully this had some value to you. And I'm going to pause and take questions. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the presentation, Bob. So folks, while we'll have Bob return to StreamYard, our live streaming platform. And while he does that, we'll just go through the audience questions and load them onto the stream for Bob to answer. So Bob, you can let me know when you return to StreamYard. You can just exit out of your presentation. There.
I think I am.
Fantastic. So Bob, here is our first question from our audience. Charlie asks a particular question. What do you use to track your goals, list managers, etc.?
That's a great question. Honestly, what I use to track my goals is I actually keep a list. I wish I had it right in front of me. I hold them in my wallet. So people use vision boards. I actually track my goals I look at them on a quarterly basis, sometimes a monthly basis. And one of the things that I like to do is to see if I'm staying on, if I'm on track, if I'm veering off course. I just keep it very simple. I just make sure that the key is that I visit them. And so, if you look at things like 6 months down the line, if you miss by a lot, then you really, I'm sort of like a recipe person. So I just keep track of them on a list, and I visit them frequently to see if I am on track to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Charlie, we hope that answered your question. Another question. One of our audience members asks, what do you do when you have a similar name to someone else with the same name / similar name? Particularly I'm assuming in regards to searching up yourself online.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's a tough one. Oh, geez. So we're talking about if you Google yourself and something comes up and maybe it's not that very positive. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, people have actually played on that. So I remember somebody, her name was Cynthia, and I won't give the last name, and she had a very similar name to somebody, and it was always causing confusion. And she would say, "Hi, I'm Cynthia with an I," right? So she would actually incorporate that in her branding statement, which I thought was very interesting to separate herself. But if it's causing some, disconnect as far as someone else's, it's negative, and it's causing some, interference in your brand, then I would have to think about that. If the person wants to email me, I would love to take it offline, because that's a tough one.
And folks, we do have Dr. Bob Daniel's contact information on the top. You can connect with him on LinkedIn or reach out to him personally by email.
Yeah, that was a tough question.
Yeah, I would have to
Yeah,
say I haven't run into that particular
yeah,
issue. I guess just because my name is a little bit it's differently spelled than most others.
right.
Might have been misspelled at birth, but so I haven't had too many people who match the same
Okay.
name. This next question, Eugene asks, your opinion on marquee who's listing for personal branding, if you've come across it at all.
You know, I've seen it. I'm personally, I'm, you know, I guess. I mean, I personally don't use it, but I have seen it, and I've been. We're talking about where you could pay to be on a list. I believe that's the question. I've just kept things simple. I've just kept things organic. I I have a tendency just to try to be as genuine as possible. I reach out to people. My circle of influence is it has grown over time. But I make sure that everybody that knows who I am knows who I am, and I know who they are. And so I don't know if it's a bad thing or good thing. I personally don't use it. So
Awesome, thank you. This next question, by defining who you are, do you not limit your growth and push the boundary to learn more? Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to read the question. I think I understand where the person's coming with this, but I think you have to think in terms of there was a theory. It slipped my mind. It's actually your real self and it's like your real self and your ideal self. And there's a concept that says that when you're thinking about defining who you are, it's your real self. It's like where you currently are at right now, and then your like self is like where you want to be. And so, yeah, I can understand why that could possibly be an issue, but I also think that it's okay to understand where you're at right now. So think about it as so we have a lot of engineers. So think if you're at alpha right now, and you want to get to beta, or you want to get to release. So I would just say, think of it in terms of your current state. And at the same time, that's why you have goals where you want to be your future state, right? And so that gap is really, what you're going to do with that, right? So if you're currently, so if you want to be, I guess if you wanted to be an actor and currently you want to be a screen actor and you're currently, doing plays, where you are right now, what do you bring? You bring the audience to tears. You've been, critically acclaimed. How do you make that transition to be somebody, that's going to be in TVs, movies, and that type of stuff? So I think you just have to be careful about, like, don't necessarily let it limit to you, but at the same time, understand who you are and then where you want to be. And I think that will help alleviate that. But I do understand the question, and it's a really good one.
Fantastic, thank you, Bob. And I feel like that kind of relates to not a question, but a statement that an earlier one of our audience members said earlier. Something audience member said, "Learning only stops when you're dead."
Yeah.
And I think that definitely rings true. This next question, Tom asks, is your personal brand a symbol like the Golden Arches or a statement?
It's a statement. I use the Golden Arches as a kind of as a branding symbol. We do know that that's part of it. Like, just do it with the swoosh with Nike. But I think your branding statement should be a statement. And you are actually the symbol, right? So the person is the symbol. The statement is who the person is. So that's why, that consistency piece is just not, it's just not about a statement. It's like who you are, how do you carry yourself, what you stand for. And, but it's another great question. Hopefully I answered it for them.
Fantastic. Thank you. Larissa asks, is personal branding just for when you're looking for a job or career change? What if I don't have a precise target audience?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. No, I think a personal branding statement could be if just for you personally. I mean, I use the word personally twice there. It's really how you define yourself in a way that really encapsulates who you are in a very concise statement. You don't necessarily have to be looking for a job or a career change. Now, the precise target audience. usually when you do brand, you're trying to target, you are trying to target something precisely. Like, and I want to be clear about this. It's not changing the brand statement to like a different industry or whatever. The brand is really you. So if you don't have a precise target, then think about, what you want to be known for. Even if you're talking to, if you, let's just say you work for a nonprofit, let's just say you're, volunteer at school board or your PTA or something like that. It's who you are. And, what would you, if someone asked you to tell you about yourself, what would you tell them? Granted, we all tell stories, right? I'm a dad, I'm a grandfather, I was a professor, we all say that, but this is more of kind of in a kind of a very, more of a formal professional setting, not for really informal, but you can share it informally. So.
Thank you for that insight, Larissa. We hope that answered your question. I also feel like personally, I think it's a personal branding and use personally too. It's really crucial when building your own bio. And I think you don't necessarily just need a bio when
Yeah.
you're looking for career change. It's
Yeah.
it's for any purpose. It really
Yeah.
is just letting people know who you are. This next question, Brendan Godfrey asks, how would your advice differ for people who are retired?
That's a great question, Brendan. And as somebody who is in his 60s, I have not struggled with this one, but I've struggled with it, if that makes any sense. And so I work with a lot of folks that are in that range, anywhere from their late 40s to, up until their 70s and 80s. And it doesn't really necessarily differ. The thing about it is that you're going to, and again, I'm going to write my third book, and my third book is going to be on, the aging factor and hiring and all that, what it looks like. But you have to look at it in terms of, if you're targeting a certain group or a certain industry, you might want to think about adding the things that you may be doing that not necessarily don't, like, for example, I often will talk to organizations about how active I am. Like, if they ask me some questions about what I like to do, I'll talk about, I like to hike, I like to climb. I want to give them the impression that even though I'm in my 60s, I still am alive, right? So finding ways to kind of incorporate the kind of the seasoning that you have from being in the workforces a long ways it's not necessarily, I wouldn't differ the advice. It just helps. You just have a lot of more stuff to cut through, if that makes any sense. So I say that folks that have had a lot of career, like myself, I have what they call an iceberg career, which means that, most employers only want to know about the first 10 to 15 years, but they don't want to know about the 25 years that lie beneath the iceberg, the waterline, right? So I never could talk about, like, you haven't heard me talk about my broadcasting career. I spent 20 years working in broadcasting. And so when I build my brand, I have to be careful that I try to encapsulate everything that I've done, not just the things I've done in the last 10 to 15 years, but everything. And so my advice would be for folks that are retired or with a lot of experiences, you're going to have to dig through a lot of the nectar a little bit and really come up with that brand that really, showcases what you are. But I like to I'll be honest with you. If I have dialogue with folks, I do spice in like words like, I want to be a long-term key contributor, which is not a branding statement. But I definitely want folks to know that I am not going to be leaving, the workforce in 5 minutes, and I'm not ready to go to sleep and take naps during the day either, or get dinner at 4 o'clock. So, it's a great question. Love to take that one offline if I can. So, but hopefully that helped answer it.
All right. Thank you so much for that insight. Frank asks, what platform should we use to begin building our personal brand? I'm assuming LinkedIn and personal interactions come to my mind.
Yeah, LinkedIn's a good way to do that. Some people use e-portfolios. I know that's been a common, I work for Amazon. So when, one of the things that I've noticed in hiring practices, we ask people for their portfolios. So making sure, again, making sure that your brand is consistent throughout everything you do. LinkedIn is a great platform because it's free, right? So you can use that, not just to put your career history up there, but also to start writing articles, comments, blogs. It does give you those features. That's what happened with me starting in 2020. I started to write a little more. I started to express some of my experiences in ways that I hadn't done it before, and it just dovetailed from there. So I do like that. The personal interactions are definitely a way to do that. I mean, just getting your circle, just your circle of friends and family, and again, people who are invested in your success, practicing, so to speak, with them how to get your brand out there is just one way to take that first step.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Frank, for the great question. This next question, Connie asks, what do you do if you have a really common name and Google brings back info on a lot of, so I guess we've kind of gotten into this, but
Yeah.
if you have any additional insight, or if you wanted to like recap your
Yeah,
answer.
I would say that if it's negative and it's causing you some inherent harm that you know about, you're going to have to find a way to distinguish that. You may even make a comment. I don't know if you can do it in your personal brand, but in a correspond. I mean, if there's something that's coming up really, because we do know that employers are digging into us. I mean, we do know that happens. So just try to make something distinguishable that separates you from that other person. Hopefully they're not in the same city, state. I mean, if you got a middle initial, something to just, like me, I'm Robert, and I go by Bob, and I go by Rob. And some people call me Robbie, some people call me my last name. I mean, whatever distinguishes you from that, or maybe use photos. I mean, if you don't have a headshot or a good headshot that really some people can go, oh, that's not that Sally Jane. That's a different Sally Jane. A lot of times, if you don't have photos, I mean, people don't know how to discern. The only thing they have is the name. So,
Yeah, and actually, going off of that as well, I feel like this is when having some online social presence is really
yeah,
important. We also did actually one of our few audience members, Edward, just pointed out you could include your middle initial as well.
yeah,
Middle name, excuse
yeah,
me. So thanks for the great insight,
yeah.
Edward. Um, this next question, Lane asks, what's the best way to brand yourself if you're re-entering the workforce after 10 years or, a long extended
Yeah.
amount of time?
I've alluded to this, and I work with a lot of folks that haven't been in the workforce for quite a while. And, the first thing they tell me is that I have no experience, or I worked, 10 years and I haven't done anything. And for most folks, they have done something, right? So whether they've, and I talked about ownership, and the one thing I didn't really get deep into is when I talk about the car, and people say, I don't know, I don't have a car, I've never owned a car, Bob, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. And I'll tell them this: if you've raised a family, if you get up every day to do something, to jog, to work out, to take care of somebody else, whatever, what ownership feels like, right? And so if you've been doing these things, if you've been managing a household, if you've been taking care of you, if you've been doing something, there's definitely some strong skill sets, strong experiences that you could bring out of that can help you build your branding statement. Don't allow the compensation piece to interfere with the great things that you have done. I've known a lot of folks, both stay-at-home moms and stay-at-home dads, who do far intricate things than I ever do. They manage budgets. They coordinate activities with three different sets of children. I mean, that's a skill set. I mean, so you have to look at it in terms of, what did you do in between then and now? What are the things that would add value, that really represent what you've done? Don't let the compensation piece get in the way of the defining, your value and your worth, right? So that would be my answer to that.
Fantastic, thank you. So, folks, I do see that we have a good number of questions left. Bob, are you still good on time?
I'm good for another 15 minutes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, folks, all right, we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. This next question, Ruben asks, what advice do you have for someone whose personal brand is sort of split? He says that he has a professional brand as a designer, but also an online social media brand for making videos, so as a content creator.
I think you have to, the first thing you have to do is really sit them down and ask them, how do they see themselves, and let them articulate what that may look like, and then share your kind of perspective, and then be specific. I've had some folks, I've worked with some folks who have this, and they define themselves as a boxer. I'm just making the analogy, and really they're a ballet dancer, and they don't understand that. And it's not that; it's just the way you self-identify. And so, you really, it's asking these probing questions on why, like, when you get someone to kind of work that through in a very non-defensive approach, they'll kind of walk through why. And sometimes sometimes they actually are that, but it's just that they're not articulate that. I just had this conversation with my brother, who I don't think is on this call. And we were talking about his future career roles, and he was talking about, about being a higher level up. And ultimately what it really boiled down to is that I asked him, are you doing those responsibilities and things right now? And he was like, yes. And I said, well, then you are that person, right? Don't let the title, this is not about, saying you're this on your resume and that. It's, if you have those skills, don't let the title prevent you from doing that. And it's the same thing when you have a split, kind of a split. You have to be, whether or not he wants to be making videos or being a designer, why can't you be a designer who makes videos? I mean, so you can look at those. I mean, just look at the pieces and see if it can create a constant and a consistent message that's clear, that people can articulate without going, what is he? Or what is that? What are they? That would be my advice.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ruben. I hope you answered that or that we answered your question.
Great question.
This next question from one of our IEEE members, Dr. Zephyr Takvi. I'm retired but involved in a lot of volunteering, not interested in getting a job, but making presentations to help others. What would be key for him? I guess in creating his own personal brand.
Yeah, I would think so. I would say that, look, you know what? I would think about those accomplishments for volunteering. I do a lot of volunteer work, and I don't necessarily talk about that, oh, I'm on the board for this. I talk about the things that we did. So, as part of fundraising that raised $2.5 million to take a program that was going to die to essentially become one that's more robust, and it's changed the lives of 4,000 students. Talk about the accomplishments that you did as you're volunteering. Even if you were the person that took notes and you were a treasurer at the meeting or whatever you did, you had to have some kind of outcome. There was something that you did that changed someone's life in some way or contributed to the change as a team or whatever. And those are the things you really want to talk about in your personal brand, I didn't get into all the personal brands examples. Not all of them apply to people that are looking for work. A lot of them are about who they are. And so that would be the key to me. Accomplishments, think about the things that have made a difference, and just go from there.
And one of our audience member did just ask a question that I feel like is important to point out. Aliyah says, I think what Bob is trying to teach us, don't see a brand as what you do, but who you are, or it's not just about your job, but who you truly are, right?
Absolutely. We shouldn't define ourselves by what we do. Believe me, I know a lot of folks that do that. And there was a time in my career, I did that. If you asked me who I was, I would say, I'm the director of broadcast operations at a large, media company, right? That wasn't who I was. I mean, this is the thing I tell everybody. Every day we wake up and we look in the mirror some way, at least we look in the mirror twice a day or maybe once a day. And I'm not doing it for my hair or makeup, by the way. So we look in the mirror in the morning, and then we go to bed at night and we look in that mirror, and we, whether we, brush your teeth or not. And I say to myself, what do I see back? Do I like what I see back from that reflection? And then I ask myself those questions, and I think that's where you're being true to yourself. I mean, look, we're all capable of blocking out things that we don't want to think about, or exaggerating things that aren't as big as they are. At the end of the day, it's about you. It really is. And how do you feel about yourself? And how do others see you, right? I'm very, very fortunate. I have a lot of folks that, that are not only in my home, but also friends and family will call me out on stuff. They're like, no way, and at first I'm like, why would they do? And then I get it. Right. And so, there really is something too about this, be true to thyself. And so that's what works for me. And that's that keeps me in alignment. Right.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you. See that we have just several questions left. We'll definitely try to get to as many of them. This next question, how many hours to initially set up your brand, and how many hours do you spend per month maintaining?
Oh man, I probably didn't calculate that out, but it's not like 3, and it's not, it's not 24. So it takes some work, right? I probably spend a couple of hours a month maintaining my brand. When I got it launched, when I really started to really, ramp it up, probably in 2020, I probably took considerable amount of time to really get to understand, where I was at, what I wanted to do. Um, you know, Talking to people, that takes time. I mean, is it maybe a work week? I mean, 40 hours, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to scare anybody off. I mean, it shouldn't take 10 minutes, and it shouldn't take 6 months. Um,
Mhm.
I think for me, because I had such a big network, and I had a lot of experience and a lot of like soul searching to do. It took me a little bit. I can't quantify that, and I apologize. I'm not trying to hedge it. But I do know I spend like a couple of hours a month looking at my brand. I do. And that's just my brand, but just overall, my goals to see if I'm in alignment. But it's not going to, like I said, this is not an easy task, but it's not a hard one. But this is the way I'll put it. This is the way I'll put it to you. If you're spending time watching stuff on Netflix, if you're like me, if you really like the show and you're binging and you want to do 2 episodes, do one and then do the other one and work on your brand, right?
Right.
So if you have a 10-part series, then it's 10 hours. There's 10 hours right there, right?
Right.
So that would be kind of my advice. Just find the time. You could find the time to do it.
Yeah. I'm sure there are tips to speeding up the process, but also there are factors that slow it down a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like one important factor might definitely be getting some external consulting about like who people see you as,
Yeah.
as
And that
much
takes
as
time.
it's important to believe what you are, which kind
Yeah.
of goes into this next question. Michael seems to have a similar opinion. It seems like our personal branding would not be complete until we got effective and unbiased feedback from trusted contacts. Do you have any suggestions for who might provide this level of feedback?
Yeah, I would say your trusted contacts would be really a great source. Again, these are folks that will tell you that your breath stinks, right? And they're vested in your success. Like I said, I'm really fortunate. I have some really, really super close friends, and my family members have always been really transparent with me. But I have a really good friend. We have these conversations on a regular basis. I mean, like not every day. We don't talk brand, but like we'll occasionally have one, maybe once or twice a month, and we'll talk about these kinds of things. And my friend will be very candid with me. He'll say like, "Hey, you know what? You said you were gonna, this is what you're telling me that you're all about, but I don't see you doing it." Um, and vice versa. I mean, how I knew my brand was, I could. So let me back the question up. How I knew my brand wasn't effective. I'll share this story. I'll be real quick. I was at a lunch. I was with some really high profile people, and we were sitting around. This was pre-COVID, and we were sitting around. This was like in late 2019. This is why I decided to kick my brand in 2020. And there was a group of people that I had been in a conversation with, and I was kind of on the outside of the conversation, and they were talking about adding a board member to an institution, a pretty well-known institution in this area, and they were looking for somebody to be on the board. And I was thinking to myself, like, hey, I'm here, right? Like, I would be a really good fit because it was about careers and about they wanted a career focused person. And, I was thinking, oh, I was trying to be humble and just hang back. And then all of a sudden they brought up a couple of other names. And I knew some of the other names. And I was thinking to myself, why the heck did they not think about me? I mean, I wasn't like hurt or anything like that, but I was kind of surprised. And so, I remember going home and thinking about that, and then I actually reached out like about a week later or a couple of days. It was within a week time frame, and asked. I asked some folks that that was very comfortable with me about why they didn't think about me for that, and they were like, "Well, I thought you did something else," and I was like, "My gosh, I've been talking, I've been hanging out with these folks for a while, like they don't even know who I am." So that's probably who you want. That's how you want to know about how effective your brand is, and what kind of who would provide that feedback is when you assume that people understand who you are, really ask them, like, who are you? I mean, I share this story, and it's unrelated, but it's related. I one time asked, I have 4 children. I once asked my son if I was a good dad. And I didn't ask him because I thought I was a bad dad. I was just curious. We were really close, and I said, "Hey, am I a good dad?" And it made him kind of take a step back, and he was like, "Well, why are you asking that? Has something happened to you?" And I go, "No, no, no. I'm just curious." And so I mean, I took a little coaching, because I was like, "Well, you're a good dad." And I said, "Well, no, no. Why do you think it?" And he said, "Because you listen to me, because you're there for me, and da da da." And that's, you know what? That's kind of like that. That's my brand, right? I do try to help others. I do try to listen. And so, sometimes we think that people really know who we are, but they might not. They just see what they see, right? So, you got to ask the question, and don't be afraid about what the answer might be, So,
Right. Fantastic insight. Thank you. So we'll end it off with these last 2 questions.
sure.
First question, Johnny asks, advice on selling yourself in interviews when your resume shows a consistency with improving your education, but your job/work history is somewhat checkered.
Yeah.
Um, I guess it's hard to really understand what checkered is, but I guess maybe
It could be like spotty,
right.
different jobs and whatever. You know, I think that you go into that interview understanding that organization better, that organization understands itself, right? And in that interview, you're going to be talking about the things that that either you've learned about them or they share with you that are issues and problems, and what you bring to the table and why you're going to be a key contributor. Um, you know, Organizations want problem solvers, right? They want people that can not only help them today, but help them in the future. So I would talk about those things that that you have learned and you bring to the table, and don't be afraid to talk about your checkered history. Look, I haven't worked for a lot of companies for a very long time, and I really talk about what I bring, the collection of my experiences and my education, and why that's applicable. You have to take this from the account of what's in it for them, not what's in it for you. You have to explain to them and share with them, and that's where a branding statement can come in really great in a situation, that what you have, or who you are professionally and personally, is what they need, right? But you don't like just slam it on them and just say that. You basically apply it. Like, I didn't share the last couple, one of the things I did in my branding statement was, when I had my conversations for my interviews, is that I would end it with, that's why, this organization, that's why I want to join this organization. And these are the things that I can do to make, take things from good to great. Right. So you just have to be able to, articulate that. And you got an interview. So obviously there's something on your resume that's attractive, because companies are just not giving interviews just to give interviews. So that would be my advice.
Right. Definitely. Johnny, hope that answered your question. This last question, Connie asks, how do you handle a situation when your employer highly regulates your social media presence, including bans on Facebook and Twitter, to guard against your being hacked? So I guess how do you build your presence when you're limited to
Yeah,
having
that's
an
a tough
online
one.
presence?
Well, that's difficult. So, boy, I think LinkedIn has been it's been more of an accepted platform. It's not really, it's social media, but it's, professional social media. So I think that may be a workaround. I have worked for the government and, the DoD, and I do, I still hold a security clearance. So, I have to be very careful about my social media, and, so I've never had any pushback on using LinkedIn. I just try to not, get into those topics or areas that, could cause, some type of, branding issues with my organization.
Hmm.
But, yeah, so posts go through the company account. No, I get that. I don't know if I would just say, find a way to, I'm sure they're not, you may have to just take if social media is locked down, and I don't know to what extent, Connie, but you may have to try to find ways through branding, through different outlets like webinars, presentations, I don't know if the in-person's ever going to come back to where it was, but, writing papers, getting out there, volunteering. I worked for an organization that was really locked down, and I found ways to work around that. A lot of times I would just tell them that I'm going to scrub out anything that has anything to do with them. And, like I was on the radio talking about a topic, and they were telling me that I couldn't mention the university, I just said it, I couldn't mention the university, and I didn't, which to quite frankly, we had a big audience, and it was really to their, they didn't get that branding lift. But yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know how bad that lockdown, but LinkedIn usually been an acceptable way to do that. So
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult situation no matter what.
I've heard that though. I've heard that some companies will monitor their employees' social media, and because they figure that's they're part of their brand, right? So they don't want to get caught up in that. So it's unfortunate, but it is true.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Bob. Everyone, unfortunately, we are out of time. If you have any more questions for Bob later on, you can definitely feel free to reach out to him or connect with him on LinkedIn. Bob, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today and
you.
giving our audience your insights. Definitely crucial tips on getting ahead and standing out for sure. And thank you to everyone for tuning in to this webinar and for your great questions. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We'll also be including the links to Dr. Bob Daniel's ebooks that he's written for IEEE. We've also included a link to his previous webinar that he did with us. So check those on demand at any time. This webinar will be archived on our Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn pages afterwards. Follow us on social media at IEEE USA and stay up to date on future webinars. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.